There comes a moment in a woman's life when everything on the outside still looks fine, but inside, something can no longer continue the same way. You still go to work, you still take care of your family, you still maintain relationships. But every morning when you wake up, your body feels heavier, your mind feels more exhausted, and there is a very clear inner sense. I've been holding myself together for far too long. Not because you are weak, but because you have endured too much. Enduring staying silent when you were treated unfairly, enduring smiling when something inside you was hurting, enduring the urge to say no and saying it's fine instead. Modern women are incredibly good at adapting, too good. You learn to be agreeable at work, you learn to yield in relationships, you learn to tolerate discomfort to keep the peace. And slowly, you lose touch with what you actually want. There are moments when you feel irritated for no clear reason. Moments when you feel empty, even though nothing is missing. Moments when you want to disappear from every role you occupy, without knowing why. In truth, this is not moodiness. These are needs that have been ignored for too long, finding a way to speak. You have grown used to placing others first, the needs of your family, the expectations of society, the emotions of your partner, your colleagues, but rarely do you ask yourself, and what about me? Carl Jung once suggested that when a person repeatedly ignores what truly matters to them, fatigue does not remain only in the mind. It leaves its mark on the body and emotions as well. You do not need more motivation. You are not lacking discipline or skills. You are simply living out of alignment with yourself. And the moment you can no longer endure is not a failure. It is a necessary pause, a forced stopping point, so you can look honestly at how you have been treating yourself. For the first time in a long while, you begin to question the familiar phrases. I have to be patient so things stay calm. It's okay if I sacrifice a little. I shouldn't be selfish. And a new thought appears, very quiet, but very real. If I keep living like this, I will slowly disappear. That thought does not weaken you. It wakes you up. Because from this point on, you are no longer trying to endure better. You begin to look for a way to live more truthfully. When you begin to live more truthfully, the first thing that happens is not the sense of relief you may have hoped for. It is conflict, not loud, dramatic conflict, but small, repeated friction moments when you realize you no longer have the strength to continue as you once did. You no longer have the energy to nod just to move things along. No longer have the patience to compromise unconditionally. No longer feel the need to over-explain why you need space of your own. The things that once felt automatic, staying quiet, giving way, enduring, now feel heavy. And that confuses you, because for a long time you have been the person others felt comfortable being around. You were easy, easy to understand, easy to work with, easy to live with, easy to compromise. You learned how to soften your voice so no one felt uncomfortable, how to step back so everything stayed smooth, how to set your own feelings aside to keep the atmosphere pleasant for everyone else. You did this very well. So well that at times you forgot when the exhaustion actually began. Then one day, you start to say what you need, not loudly, not aggressively, just honestly. You decline something you would have accepted before. You don't immediately agree the way you used to. You don't offer long explanations for a decision that is deeply personal. And then you notice a shift in other people's expressions. Some look surprised, as if they don't quite recognize this version of you. Some feel uncomfortable because they were used to you being accommodating. Some say it gently, but loud enough for you to hear. You've changed lately. And that sentence, even without bad intention, touches an old fear inside you, a very familiar fear. Am I becoming selfish? You begin to question yourself. replaying your words, wondering if you went too far, if you should soften again, if it would be easier to return to the old version just to keep the peace. Because for a long time you were taught that a good woman is one who yields, who sacrifices, who puts others first. And when you stop doing that, your mind immediately sounds an alarm. Am I doing something wrong? But here's the truth. You are not more selfish. You are not becoming cold. You are not turning away from others. You are simply no longer disappearing. You are no longer automatically pushing your own feelings aside. No longer assuming that other people's needs are always more important than yours. No longer living as if your existence is only acceptable when it causes no discomfort. And because of that, the world around you has to adjust. Not everyone is ready for that. Some people were only comfortable with the version of you who always gave, always listened, always understood others before understanding herself. When you change, the old balance is disrupted. That does not mean you are wrong. It simply means you have stepped out of an unspoken agreement you never consciously consented to. Conflict appears not to punish you, but to show you where you have been sacrificing too much. It reveals which relationships only functioned when you yielded, which environments cannot tolerate your boundaries, and where you need to ask yourself, how much longer do I want to keep living this way? Living more truthfully does not make life easier right away. But it does something far more important. It gives you back to yourself. And that is where real change begins. When you begin to live more truthfully, the relationships in your life no longer respond in just one way. Some relationships grow closer, not because you are trying harder, but because for the first time, you are showing up as who you truly are. You are not bracing yourself, not performing the role of the understanding one, not hiding what you really think or feel. And something unexpected happens. There are people who see you more clearly in that honesty. They feel a sense of relief. They feel more connected. Because at last, they are no longer relating to a polished, agreeable version of you, but to a real human being who is fully present. But not every relationship responds this way. Some begin to feel strained, uncomfortable, or quietly distant. Not because you became difficult, not because you did something wrong, but because those relationships were once held together by your silent self-sacrifice. You were the one who listened at all times, even when you needed to be heard. You were the one who stepped aside in every disagreement, even when it drained you. You were the one who understood everyone else's circumstances before ever asking whether you yourself were okay. Your presence used to function like a soft cushion. It made others comfortable, but required you to tense yourself to keep its shape. When you stop doing that automatically, the old balance breaks, not because you destroyed it, but because you stopped holding it together with your own well-being. From that moment, you stand at a very clear crossroads. One path is familiar and tempting. Go back. Everything will feel peaceful again. The other path is much quieter. Stay with yourself, even when it feels uncomfortable. The first path offers short-term ease, less tension, fewer uncomfortable looks, less guilt. But you have walked that road for a long time, and you know the cost. Unnamed exhaustion, a hollow sense of emptiness, and slowly losing yourself. The second path is different. It does not promise comfort. It does not guarantee that everyone will stay. It offers only one thing: honesty. And honesty, at times, hurts. Some relationships begin to drift away. No dramatic arguments, no clear rupture, just fewer check-ins, less sharing, less presence. You may find yourself asking, "Oh, what did I do wrong?" But deep inside, you also know something clearly. I cannot keep living the old way. That realization is painful because no one prepares you for this part of growth. No one tells you that maturing does not only mean gaining new wisdom, but also losing what once felt familiar. You may lose an old image in the eyes of others. You may lose a role that once made you feel valued. You may lose the sense of safety that came from being needed by everyone. But within that loss, something essential is forming. For the first time, you are no longer sustaining relationships by abandoning yourself. For the first time, you are allowing relationships to be filtered by truth, not by endurance. And although this process can feel lonely, it carries a quiet and honest promise. The relationships that remain will not require you to disappear in order to exist. Not loudly, not dramatically, but when it happens, you know with absolute clarity there is no going back to the old way of living. It is the moment you realize that you have spent years living by principles you never consciously chose. No one forced you to sign an agreement, and yet, day after day, you followed it faithfully. You were taught that a woman should be gentle, should keep the peace, should think of others first. None of this is wrong. These rules once helped you survive, helped you be accepted, helped you belong. But there was one thing no one warned you about. The cost of always placing yourself last is a lifetime of quiet exhaustion. That exhaustion doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates slowly. Each time you stayed silent when you disagreed, each time you smiled to avoid inconvenience, each time you told yourself, "It's fine, I can endure a little more." Until one day you no longer have the energy to keep enduring that way. When you stop trying to please everyone, you do not become rigid. You do not become cold. You begin to have boundaries, simple boundaries, honest boundaries. You know when to listen without listening at the cost of yourself. You know when to pause instead of continuing just to keep things calm. You know when to say enough without wrapping it in guilt. And the strangest thing is this: your body understands before your mind does. You sleep more deeply, even though life's problems are still there. You feel less irritable, not because you are controlling yourself better, but because you are no longer swallowing your emotions. That vague tension begins to fade, the kind that exhausts you without explanation. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, not because the people around you change, but because, finally, you stop living against yourself. You stop siding with everyone else at your own expense. You stop draining your energy to maintain roles that slowly erase you. And this is not rebellion. It is not selfishness. It is not turning away from others. It is a return to your real sensations, a return to your limits, a return to the version of yourself you had to set aside for many years. You are not living against the world. You are simply no longer fighting yourself. And from that moment, a different way of living, lighter, truer, begins to take shape. One day, very naturally, you realize you no longer feel the need to explain yourself, not because you have become indifferent, not because you have closed yourself off from others, but because you understand something deeply now. Not every choice requires the agreement of everyone else. You no longer try to make sure everyone understands you. You no longer feel the urge to retell your life story just to prove that your reasons are valid. You no longer add an extra sentence simply to make someone else more comfortable. This silence does not come from exhaustion. It comes from steadiness. You also stop performing strength the way you once did. You no longer tense yourself to prove that you're fine. You no longer hide tired days behind a familiar smile. You allow yourself to be who you are, even when it isn't polished, even when it isn't impressive, even when it isn't easy to hear. And then you realize you only need one thing: honesty. Honesty with your emotions. Honesty about what you can and cannot give. Honesty about your limits. That honesty creates a very different kind of energy. Quiet, unforced, unassuming. People may not know how to name it, but they feel it. They feel a presence that isn't strained, not trying to be pleasing, not trying to impress, not seeking validation. You walk into a room in a very ordinary way, but without carrying the pressure to do something. You listen because you want to listen, not because you're afraid of disappointing someone. You are silent when needed, not because you lack a voice. Your presence becomes light, yet unmistakable. And that is what makes others pause, not because you shine in a dramatic way, but because you no longer dim yourself. There are women who, as time passes, retain a certain light in their eyes. That light does not come from a life without wounds. It does not come from being treated more gently by fate. It comes from no longer betraying themselves for the sake of outer harmony. They no longer live against their true sensations. They no longer force themselves into roles that slowly drain their inner life. They don't need to appear younger than others. They only need to be real. And that reality, lived long enough, becomes a rare kind of calm. No affirmation needed, no proof required. Just a person who has finally settled into herself. This is not the end of the journey, but it is a very important point. When you stop living to please others, life begins to meet you more fully. Not in the easiest way, but in the truest one. Perhaps by now you are no longer searching for a clear, definitive answer. Not because you understand everything, but because you feel something deeply real. You are exactly where you need to be. This journey did not begin with becoming stronger. It began the moment you stopped fighting yourself. You have moved through stages that few people ever see, silences others couldn't understand, relationships that had to change, long evenings when you wondered whether you were making a mistake. But if there is one truth worth holding on to, it is this. You didn't lose anyone by being real. You simply stopped holding on to what no longer belonged to you. Not every path continues. Not every person walks beside you. And not every role needs to be maintained. What you gain is not a more perfect life, but a life with far less pretending. You sleep more deeply. You listen more clearly. You begin to recognize what drains you and what makes you feel alive. You don't need to name this change. You don't need to label it. It's enough to notice that you have come back to yourself. And perhaps that is why time no longer touches you the way it once did. Not because you stay young forever, but because you are no longer old to yourself. If, at any moment during this video, you felt your heart slow by a single beat, or sensed something gently reach you, it wasn't because of the words. It was because a part of you was ready to be heard. This channel is not here to tell you how to live, nor is it here to fix you. It exists to walk beside you on quiet journeys that not everyone dares to take. If you choose to stay not to learn something new, but to remember what you've always known, you're welcome to follow the channel. There are no grand promises, only slow conversations about the inner life, about growth, and about living a life that does not betray who you truly are. And for now, you don't need to do anything else. Just stay a little while with the honest feeling you're carrying. When the time comes, you'll know what your next step is.